Konami, and welcome to Wednesday Watchies, the show where I tell you what movies I've been watching. This week's watch recap is the 1996 romantic comedy film Mrs. Winterbourne, starring Brendan Fraser, Shirley MacLaine, and Ricky Lake. The movie starts at the end. Our movie opens up with a shot of an unknown man lying in a bed in a motel room with a TV on. You know, if you just ignore the bullet holes that are pretty visible in his chest, you just think he's watching some TV. And as the TV goes on with whatever program, camera zooms in to his face, and then we cut to a cathedral with wedding bells ringing, and we get our first introduction to Miss Grace Winterbourne, the fabulously wealthy matriarch of the Winterbourne family, played by Miss Shirley MacLaine. In what seems to be a lovely day of celebration, very quickly derails as police approach Mrs. Winterbourne and then ask for Mrs. Winterbourne, but specifically Patricia Winterbourne. And we find out that the police are investigating the murder of one Mr. Stephen DeCunzo. So Grace decides that she's going to claim to be the murderer and walks off with the police as the priest that was standing next to her goes running off into the church to save himself, maybe in a panic to get someone. We don't know quite yet. And then narration begins as Connie Doyle, Miss Ricky Lake's character, cuts in to bring us back to the actual beginning of the story. So we get to listen to her talk about how she grew up in Jersey. Her mom died at 12. She moved out when she was 18 to get away from her dad. Just a lot of force-fed exposition about a character that we don't know and don't care about yet. And of course, it's tied off with a pretty bow of a deep quote from her mom about going out to find her destiny. And so, of course, this leads her to New York City. And this is where we meet Mr. Stephen DeCunzo, the corpse himself, the man of the hour, the worst person in this movie. And he's sitting there at a diner where Connie is there counting out some change to try and pay for her bill. And he decides, hey, this young, vulnerable girl, that's the one. I'm going after that. That's easy pickings. So he saunters on over to her booth, sits down, starts chatting her up, complete with asking her like, oh, how old are you? And she says, oh, well, I'm 18. It's actually my birthday. And he hits her with the classic, oh my God, you're so mature for it being your 18th birthday. And Connie falls hook, line, and sinker because she's a stupid 18-year-old girl. And she gets swept up by this man who knows what he's doing and sits there telling her that, oh, she's so beautiful and misunderstood. And I get it, but like other people don't. All the other fluff that a teenage girl would just eat up. And of course, narrator Connie calls herself out for falling for it. So Connie then moves in with him, and we see her essentially wait on this man hand and foot in exchange for a place to live and, quote, her pick of stolen car radios. That's right, this man not only is an impeccable gentleman, but he has a fantastically secure and safe job in dealing stolen goods. Connie quickly finds herself disillusioned with her circumstances, saying that she was expecting more, that this was supposed to be what destiny that she was supposed to go out and find, according to the quote from her mom, which of course this girl carries a picture of her mom in an oversized locket so that she can look at it dramatically and ask for help. She needs a sign, Mom. Please tell her what to do. And she gets a whopper of a sign. We cut back to Connie holding a pregnancy test, and she finds out the oven is occupied with a bun. And of course, Stephen DeCunzo, being the type of guy he is, our upstanding citizen, all-around nice guy, Stephen DeCunzo, kicks Connie out on the street after saying that, oh, well, clearly this can't be his baby. And she's been messing around, and even accuses and coerces one of his goons over in the corner to agree that, oh, yeah, he's definitely been messing around with Connie so that Steven cannot be responsible and kick her out and not feel bad for it whatsoever. What a good guy. What a good guy. Why would anyone murder him? And then this is beyond the scope of the plot of the movie, but there's this weird thing in watching the movie where a lot of Connie's lines sound really obviously dubbed and replaced in a way that stands out compared to everyone else. I don't know if Ricki Lake likes to loop her lines for the best take or just something else, but the difference in sound quality between her lines and the rest in some of the scenes is just jarring. It's just really obvious when you'll cut from someone else speaking to a Connie line and she suddenly has like completely different sound quality, like it's perfectly crystal clear and like louder almost in a way. It's really weird. It bothered me the whole time. It bothered me the whole time I watched it. I couldn't stop thinking about the fact like this woman sounds like she's dubbed these lines. This does not sound like this is being said in this environment. That's just a little nitpick. To get back to the story, after Connie says, well, she's not getting rid of the baby, she is out on the rough and tumble New York City streets all on her own again, except this time she's pregnant and has decided to swear off men. We see her stumbling around, getting very, very pregnant at some point as she talks about getting fired from her waitressing job for not fitting in the uniform anymore, how she's run out of time at the Y and is completely broke, just, you know, she's got nothing and no one and not a place in the world. So Connie decides to go back to Steven and tries to tell him that she's about to have his baby out on the street if he wants to watch. Try to guilt this man into letting her back in for somewhere safe, I suppose. Unfortunately for her, doesn't work out. He tosses a quarter to her out through the window and tells her to go on and have the baby in the street. We also see during this scene that he's got a new girlfriend and he's started the cycle anew. And she's there asking, who was that? And he's just like, oh, you know, some crazy bitch that says she's pregnant with my baby. New girlfriend doesn't care. She's just like, yeah, wow, weird. So Connie takes a quarter and wanders off again. And of course, in the most ham-fisted 90s way, it's raining. It's just pouring. She's drenched. Everyone's drenched. It's like a typhoon out there. And all she has is a newspaper to keep the rain off. We gotta make it extra dramatic. So Connie ends up wandering her way to the train station where a beggar is at and decides to take pity on her after she lashes out at him. And he gives her a moist towelette to clean up and tells her where to find a shelter she can stay at. And when she goes to look back and thank him, suddenly he's gone. It's like the magic disappearing homeless man. Connie ends up accidentally getting herded onto a train on the way to Boston instead of finding her way to the subway to get to the shelter. So, of course, Connie's on the train and the door is closed and the conductor is right there coming through asking for tickets. And, of course, she doesn't have a ticket. She runs off after claiming that her husband has her ticket. And here is where we meet Brendan Fraser, number 1, whose hair is interesting. It's long and very voluminous. It's certainly a look. And this man, complete stranger to Connie, decides he's going to cover for her as her husband and provides a ticket to keep her on the train. After saving her butt, he takes Connie to get a soda and then guides her to his room car where his actual wife is there waiting. And here is where we meet Patricia, the Patricia Winterbourne that the police were looking for in the beginning at the cathedral. And then, of course, shenanigans ensues where Brendan Fraser goes to get another drink for his actual wife, leaving 2 pregnant women alone, where Connie ends up dumping most of her drink on Patricia after they hit a little rough spot in the track. And we find out that Patricia lived in Hong Kong most of her life and just got into the US. And there's a joke about Connie trying to play off like, oh yeah, it's totally a normal thing that we do in the US, dump our drinks on people. It's not a good joke. It's not a good joke. So after noticing that Connie is drenched from the rain, Patricia tells her to wear one of her other night dresses, I guess it is. In a very convenient set of circumstances, Patricia then decides to pull off her wedding ring after talking about how much her hands have swollen from pregnancy, and then encourages Connie to try it on. I don't think I've ever known anyone to be like, oh yeah, no, try on my wedding ring. And Connie's there like, isn't that bad luck? And still Patricia like insists that she try it. So she does. She's wearing Patricia's wedding ring. We see that in the wedding ring, like they really take a moment to give us a shot on this, like a zoomed in shot of the wedding ring where we see that it's engraved on the inside with Brendan Fraser #1's name, Hugh, along with Patricia's name. And then everything seems to be finally looking up. A freak train accident occurs, and Connie wakes up in the hospital, no longer pregnant. So like any woman who had just gone through a severe accident and no longer has a baby inside of her, she freaks out, nearly assaults a nurse to make her bring her baby after she's assured that no, her baby's fine, it's been delivered, it's alive, we've got it right here for you. So the nurse brings her baby, and then she basically tells the nurse to like fuck off to get some private time with her baby, where she immediately decides to like check and count all of the baby's fingers and toes. She's like, yep, 10 toes, yep, 10 fingers, yep, you're normal. Except like there's a joke in there where she accidentally miscounts and thinks that there's 11 toes. And then she's like, wait, no, it's 10, you're normal, it's great, you're perfect. And then this woman decides to name her new son Cookie. Like the food, Cookie. She looks at him and says he is as sweet as a cookie, and then decides that's what she's gonna call him. The whole 9 months she was pregnant, she didn't like think of any sort of name, male or female. She wasn't prepared whatsoever, and then she decides to call this child Cookie. Anyways, after she decides to call her baby Cookie, she takes a look finally at the identification anklet that is on the baby's leg and sees that it labels him as a Winterbourne. So of course, she's there slamming on the nurse call button like, this dumb bitch brought me the wrong fucking baby. Can I get my actual baby? And in the midst of her slamming on that call button, she takes a look at her own bracelet, her own identification band, and sees that it says Patricia Winterbourne. Classic case of mistaken identity, which is part of why we got that zoom in shot on the ring earlier. Obviously, they decided to take her ring off when she came into the hospital to find out her identity. Or maybe it was the fact that she was in their room car, but they give so much emphasis on the ring that we just sort of assume that that's how they decide that she's Patricia. But that seems like a really weird thing to have occurred. And I'm pretty sure when she wakes up in the hospital, she's wearing the ring still. So whatever. We don't ask it. We just move on. We move on. She finds out that the other pregnant woman on the train was killed in the accident along with Hugh. So now she's been taken as Patricia, and the real Patricia has been cited as Connie, having died. And we see Stephen DeCunzo getting news from the police about the fact that Connie Doyle has died in the train accident. He denies ever knowing her and goes back to his new girlfriend after the police leaves and tells her about Connie dying, and is there like, can you believe she was gonna have my baby? After he straight up denied the fact that she was pregnant with his baby when she came around to say like, hey, I'm going to have your baby in the streets. And he was like, that's not my fucking baby. And now he goes back to the new girlfriend and is like, can you believe she was going to have my baby and now she's dead? Ha, really dodged a bullet. This man is scum. Meanwhile, Connie is planning to make a break from the hospital. Unfortunately for her, she gets a call from Grace, the Winterbourne matriarch, who we met at the cathedral in the beginning of the movie. And she tells her that she has sent a car for her and that she'll be taken to live at the Winterbourne estate. And of course, Connie, not wanting to get caught up in all this mess, she tries to correct the mistake, tell her she's not the real Patricia, but everyone just sits there and steamrolls over her and moves right along with her being the real Mrs. Winterbourne, tells her she's confused, all sorts of stuff. Like they essentially think she's a hysterical woman after having a traumatic accident. So she and the baby are loaded up into the car. There's a joke in there about Connie calling a Rolls Royce the Cadillac of automobiles, to which the driver says Mercedes Benz are the Cadillac of automobiles. I want to know if like anyone laughed at this movie at any point in time in the length of time that this movie has been out. Has anyone laughed at it? Because these jokes are not funny. They're not good. Beyond that, we find out on the way to the estate that Hugh hated taking pictures. And so no one has ever seen the real Patricia. Because Hugh hates taking pictures, Patricia never had a photograph taken. Hugh was too irresponsible. They try to set that up there. Like they say that he was too irresponsible to like deal with getting the film developed and then printed and everything. And it's just one of those like little exposition moments that the movie and writers sprinkle in to try to cover holes that the audience might think of. Like, oh, you can't catch us. We already covered that one up. That one's already band-aided. You can't say, well, why wouldn't they know that she doesn't look like Patricia? No, we caught you. I don't think it's fully necessary, but, go with it. They tried to cover up the holes, so we're going to take it as it is. So they get to the estate, and Connie meets Grace, where she tries once again to explain that something terrible has happened, and she's not actually Patricia. But she stops as Grace focuses in on who she thinks is her grandson, and suggests that Connie name the baby after Hugh. And here comes Brendan Fraser number 2, which obviously makes Connie flip her shit and try to run out before she can be found out as the not real Patricia, because she thinks, oh my God, this is the guy I met on the train. He's going to know I'm not really Patricia. I'm going to get in so much trouble, even though I haven't really done anything yet or at all. She's tried like several times to tell people that she's not really Patricia. So it's not on her, but obviously she freaks. She tries to run out. She's trying to take the baby back and run out the door. And we find out that this is not Hugh, but Bill, his twin brother, who is, of course, the polar opposite of Hugh. He's reserved and formal and stuffy and wearing a suit and has properly cut hair and is very skeptical of Connie. So we have one man with a brain, and the rest of these people are just so desperate to have anyone left of the family that they just lost that they just take Connie in with no hesitation, which makes it super awkward for Connie when Grace like sits her down and starts showing her the old family scrapbook of like, look at these pictures of Hugh when he was little. And then like hands it over to her. I can't imagine being in that circumstance where like you don't know these people. And now the mother of the dead man who you met for like 10 minutes is showing you his baby pictures because she thinks that you were married to him, that you were his wife. How do you deal with that? And then Connie is given a moment of reprieve. She's left alone for a second. And she keeps calling this baby Cookie when she's alone. And I really deeply, truly hate it. I can't stand that this woman keeps calling this baby Cookie. Just call him Hugh. Just take it. Be like, yep, he's Hugh now. he got an actual name, and it's not Cookie. Meanwhile, Brendan Fraser too. Bill is attempting to convince Grace that Connie makes no sense. He starts to ask where Hugh could have possibly met her, says that she has an edge of like white trash on her, the whole 9 yards. Which, to be fair, he's not wrong, just rude. Which means Grace basically tells him to shut up because she wants to have a daughter-in-law and grandson more than she wants to see reason and logic and the facts of the situation in front of her. She's just like, shut up, I have a woman and a baby and I'm keeping them. So they call Connie down to dinner where Grace, Bill, and the priest of their church are waiting for her. And this is a totally unimportant detail, but we see someone on the production team actually learned something about proper etiquette because they have, during the dinner party, they're eating soup, and to get the last bit of the soup, they're tilting their bowls away from them, except for Connie, which is to show that she's like a fish out of water because the camera pans around to everyone doing it the right way at the table. And then Connie's tipping it towards herself. And then she looks up and notices that everyone's doing the opposite and goes to change it. So they paid attention to that actual proper rule of etiquette, but then it's ruined by the fact that the actors keep bending down to the table to meet their spoons halfway, instead of just bringing it to their mouth, which is terrible dinner table etiquette, but that's neither here nor there. So as they're at the dinner table, you have some moments where the maid tries to take the baby from Connie to free up her hands so that she can actually be at the dinner table. And Connie is like, whoa, Mrs. Hands, back off. You're not touching my baby. You're not taking him away. What's wrong with you? And just continues to show more and more that she's super not from money or a high class family or anything of the sort. Paco, the servant slash driver, brings in Grace's pills at some point during the dinner and has to basically wrestle the wine away from her to keep her from chasing them with it. And we find out that Grace has a heart condition. So that's going to be a recurring theme in terms of visual jokes and gags and jokes with Grace in general, is, her trying to sneak a cigarette or have wine or a drink instead of having water. During the dinner, Connie manages to shove her sleeve into a bowl in the most purposeful looking way. At no point does this action look like an accident. It looks like she was supposed to be accidentally dragging her sleeve through the food in the bowl, but she reaches out and then slams her arm down into the bowl. It's really bad. And then Bill, masterful, wise, super good at social situations, Bill decides he's going to start interrogating Connie at the table, asking her where she met his brother, what the wedding was like, making snide side comments the whole while. Oh, what was the wedding like? And Connie's like, oh, it was beautiful. And Bill's like, and more detail? And she's like, very beautiful. How about that? Anyone with half a brain cell could see that this woman doesn't know anything about what she's supposed to know about. But again, Grace is just like, hey, I have a baby. I have a grandson. You're not taking that from me. I already kind of lost it because they could have died in the train accident. They did. But I've got this one right here. It's alive and in front of me. So you're not fucking this up for me. We find out that Grace didn't attend the wedding because Hugh didn't bother to call her, which really upsets Grace. But also, I think that's just another piece of detail in the writers trying to cover their own butts and being like, well, if Hugh and Patricia got married, wouldn't they have their family at the wedding? Wouldn't they have already met and seen Patricia? But no, because Hugh was really irresponsible and loved to just do stuff impulsively, he didn't even bother to invite his family to the wedding. So Connie sits there after Grace says that she wishes she had been to the wedding if only Hugh had picked up the phone. And Connie was like, well, he was irresponsible, that sort of thing. He kind of just liked to do things. And ends up saying if she knew anything about Hugh, it was that he was the kindest person that she had ever met, that he was just the kind of person to be kind for the sake of it. And Bill, shockingly, says that Connie understood Hugh in a way he never did after she says this. And she fucks it up immediately. She fucks up this bit of trust as soon as possible by going up and following up with saying that Hugh would always say like, oh, well, we have to act different because we look just alike. And Bill immediately catches her in that and saying, I thought you didn't know that he had a twin, because that was her excuse for why she was so like scared and surprised whenever she first saw Bill. She was like, oh, I didn't know Hugh had a twin. So, it's supposed to be like, oh my God, she was overreacting because it was basically like seeing a ghost. And so now she's caught herself in her own lie, and Bill's caught it on that. And that makes Connie basically just have like a meltdown at the table and decides to leave so that she doesn't have to deal with Bill questioning her anymore. And Grace, after Connie leaves the table, just berates Bill for interrogating her at the table and like continually trying to catch her in something. And I mean, they're both kind of right here. They're both kind of right in that Bill is being an ass, but also there's a stranger in their house and infiltrating their family, and she can't even keep her story straight. There's also a joke that's carried through the dinner scene of saying like slightly obscene words and then remembering that there's a priest at the table and checking with him that the word is fine, leading to classic lines such as, tits is fine, right, father? And then him having to be like, yeah, tits is fine. And then follow it up after the dinner with like Grace saying that Bill is being an ass. And he's like, mother, the father is right there. And she's like, ass is fine, right, father? And he's there like, well, in the Bible, it says that so-and-so used the jawbone of an ass, but that means they meant donkey, and she's just there like, ass is fine. And he's like, ass is fine. That might have been the one moment of almost funny in the whole movie, in my opinion. So after the disastrous dinner, we jump to the whole family at the cathedral as they christen the baby. And this is another moment where Connie's voice sounds really obviously overdubbed, especially because you can hear her so much louder than everyone else in the scene, including the rest of the family and the congregation of the church. So it really just sounds like they overlaid her voice on top of everyone else.
Believe in one holy and apostolic church.
So they christen the baby. It's like a 2-second scene. I don't really know why they put it in there. It's like a 2-second scene of them christening the baby and Connie not knowing the words to say while it's happening, and then her having a meaningful look at the crucifix where Jesus is there, I guess to like make it seem like God, she feels so guilty. I don't know, imply she's going to hell for lying to them like this, for lying in the church of God and in God's house. So once they're home, Connie finds out that Grace has thrown a whole party to celebrate the christening, and now she's got to try to blend in with all the hoity-toity folk of high society, and she immediately does a terrible job. She is there with the baby and she's led to people, to have her talk to some people of her own age instead of all these old geezers around. And immediately these women, these snooty bitches, decide to backhand compliment her, saying like, oh, who does your hair? It's so bold. And to wear that lipstick with that nail polish, I would never. Did you get these tips from a magazine? Anyways, they're like the weakest insults that they could possibly throw at her, but they mean something because they're from high society. So it's like supposed to be really insulting that she's not super conservatively dressed like the rest of them are. So after we get more hammering on that she obviously doesn't fit in here, the pianist at the shindig, because of course they have live music, starts playing Hugh's favorite song, which Connie doesn't know the significance of it at first, and the girls that are with her are like, oh, so sad. And Connie's like, what? And they're like, this was Hugh's favorite song. And she's like, oh yeah, we would sing this all the time. And of course that leads to the snooty bitches telling Grace, and Grace dragging her up onto the stage to sing with her. And Connie absolutely does not know the song. And after a moment of blanking, and because she has no response, she doesn't know the song, when Grace tries to send it over to her to sing a verse, Grace takes over, she sings the whole song, and Connie, doing her best to pretend, decides to start ad-libbing follow-up lines to Grace's singing, sort of turning it into like a comedy act. And there's moments in this scene where you can like visibly see the baby, like the actor for the baby, change between different ages and actors, which is probably funnier than anything in the movie itself is trying to be. If you're watching out for it, it's really, really obvious. So after they finish their stage show, the snooty bitches try to insult Connie again, and Connie walks by them and tells them to fuck off. Actually, literally tells them to fuck off. And Grace comes right behind her and is like, you heard her, fuck off. Which, like, okay, Grace, go off.
What a singular interpretation.
Oh, fuck off. You heard her, fuck off.
We love that support. So Connie goes to her room in the house, and Grace follows after her, and Connie starts talking about how she doesn't fit in and points to like, well, look at me. Of course I don't fit in. Which Grace, looks at her and she was like, oh no, honey, you look fine. And then she's like, well, maybe if we change your nails, and then, well, your hair could be. And then she just ends up basically pointing out like everything about her that could be changed, and then realizes, and then cue the makeover montage, because of course there has to be one, but at least it's a really, really short one. Like, it almost seems pointless to have it in there because it's so short. Like, this movie will do these moments of like things to add flavor or like significance, but they're so short that they feel like they could have been cut completely and you wouldn't really be losing anything from it. Like the scene with christening the baby, the montage for the makeover. Like, if they just skipped that, you wouldn't be losing anything from the movie or any understanding whatsoever, because quite frankly, they tell us pretty often all the exposition that we need, like verbally. So after the montage, Grace brings the new and improved Connie to Bill's office and says, Bill, you're taking Connie out to lunch. So Bill, never one to say no to his mother because he's afraid of her. We like a grown man who's still afraid of his mother, says Connie. He takes her out on a tour of historical locations in Boston. And we hear him tell about how Hugh ended up ditching the family to avoid responsibility. And this point kind of marks the beginning of the Brendan Frasering of Bill. If you've seen any other Brendan Fraser movie, at least like the more lighthearted comedy ones, you know what I'm saying. You get what I'm saying. All Brendan Fraser characters kind of end up with his signature like mannerisms and silliness. So Bill starts to get Brendan Frasered as he starts to like clearly start softening up to Connie, and they end up going to a jeweler to get a proper chain for her mother's locket that's been on like a piece of cord this whole time. And when it comes time to pay, Connie's like, oh, this is so expensive, I could never. And Bill's like, didn't you get set up with a checking account? And she's like, well, yeah, but I don't want to. He's like, just sign the check. essentially. So Connie signs the check, fills it out, and as she's signing the check, she puts her real name. She signs it Connie Doyle. And we have a shot that's just like a zoomed in on the Connie Doyle, and then it switches to Bill, and we can see that he has seen the signature before Connie goes to hand it over to the jeweler, only to realize at that moment and takes it back and rips it up and is like, oops, I put the wrong date. So she fills out a new check with the fake signature this time for her fake name. And we cut to Bill like in this super like dramatic noir-esque shot of him in his office where he looks at like a paper that says Constance Doyle died in the train crash, confirming to him that Connie is not Patricia, and the real Patricia died in the train. Which, like, the noir shot was like really kind of unnecessary. Again, it's one of those little drops of exposition and something that was unnecessary, because we already know that Bill sussed out that she's not really Patricia because she signed the wrong name on the check. But I guess that was just to show, like, see, he got proof. He got proof that this woman is the wrong woman because she signed the name of a dead woman or someone that's supposed to be dead. So we then cut to a scene in the living room where Grace is there, her lawyer's there, and Bill comes in and he's like, "Mother, I have something to tell you." And she's like, "Wait, hold on. Shush, 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 shush." And Connie has been called down by Grace, where Grace tells her that she is being added to her will. And Connie immediately freaks out. She's like, no, 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 you can't add me to your will. You can't do that. No. Which we see like Bill is visibly surprised by, because I guess he was assuming that like Connie's whole ploy here was for money, which, you know, that would be normal to assume in that sort of circumstance. So he's like visibly surprised. He's like taken aback by the fact that Connie's immediately like, no, don't put me in the will. I don't want the money. Don't do that. Because he was just about to expose her in the lie that she's been caught in. And so despite Connie sitting there and being like, I don't want to be in the will. I'm not here for the money. Please don't do it. Grace is like, you know what? That just makes me want to put you in more. And she signs the change. And Bill gets asked by Grace right after. She's like, all right, honey, what did you need to tell me? And he says, never mind, and decides not to tell Grace the truth about Connie. So after Bill has this change of heart, we cut to our new scene where the handsy maid that Connie was mad at earlier, she has a name. I don't remember her name. Rushes in and is like, Paco's drunk again. He's upset. We have Bill like go and pull him out of the pool. It's empty. It's the empty pool. There's no danger. We have Bill go and pull him out of the empty pool and go and put him to bed. But very drunk Paco is like, Bill, Connie, you must tango. So then this is where we get the first look at like the real romantic tension between the two. They're twirling around the kitchen. She's being dipped. He's like lifting her leg up. And it ends in Bill and Connie kissing. Bill decides he's going to wander off to bed and grabs another kiss on the way as he passes her. And then the joke like repeats several times of him finding an excuse to walk past Connie again and kiss her again. So after their little tango session, Bill has finally reached full Brendan Fraser, and he goes and asks Grace for advice on if he can and should go after Connie. And she tells him that, you know what, Hugh would want you both to be happy, which is, I don't know, it's kind of odd to me that Bill would go and ask Grace for advice on getting with Connie when he knows that Connie is not Patricia, but I guess he's trying to like find out what the reaction would be because everyone else thinks that she's Patricia. But we'll come back to this later. Meanwhile, some indiscriminate time later, Connie receives her first piece of mail, and it's a blackmail letter with the simple phrases of, "Who are you?" and "Whose baby is that?" which makes Connie go into like full meltdown. She's packing her bag. She's getting ready to bolt when Bill comes in with like this massive bouquet of roses and like assumes that he's the one chasing her off, and Brendan Fraser like throws the bouquet away like, oh, these what do you mean? I'm not being too much too soon and making you leave, right? And he goes into damage control and he starts asking like the practical questions, like how's she supposed to leave if she bails on them, and the house. He's like, okay, well, do you have somewhere to go? And she's like, no. And he's like, and you have no family, right? And she's like, yeah. And he's like, okay, so you have nowhere to go, no money, no family, and a baby. So he decides he's going to sit down and like make a list of like pros and cons to try to convince her to stay. He's like, all right, pros of you leaving, nothing. And he's like, cons / pros of you staying. He's talking it out loud as he's making the list, and he's like, pros of you staying, I ask you to marry me. Like, he basically ends up casually like confessing his love for her and asking her to marry him while making this list about her staying and leaving, and tries, and he sees like her reaction, like she stops dead in her tracks and just looks at him like, what? You said what? Marriage? And he's like, or, we can just rip that part out of the list. And so obviously now Connie's like super overwhelmed, and Bill decides to leave her to think it over, but not before like talking to the baby, trying to be like, I would be a really good stepdad. I'd be a really good dad. You should totally convince your mom to marry me, bud. And there's potty humor about the baby peeing on him and him being like, well, now you have to marry me, see? And obviously, Connie decides to run. She finishes packing up all her stuff. She rushes out of the house. Like, Grace is there trying to stop her. She's there calling her name. She's there like, Patricia, Patricia. And Connie like just keeps going. She's out the house. She's off to the train station. Paco ends up chasing her down to the train station and tells her that no matter who she is, this family is hers now, and she belongs with them, after telling like his story of, this is my family now after I decided to leave Cuba. And at the end of this talk, we get a cut where we see the train roll off and all this steam billows up, and it makes it look like, Connie's getting onto the train and leaving, until the steam clears and there she is, still on the platform. So she ends up going back home with Paco, and when they get home, there's an ambulance in the drive, and we find out that Grace has had another attack from her heart condition from Connie leaving. So Connie goes up and has a heart-to-heart talk with Grace about not fitting into this world, and Grace is like, well, honey, nobody fits in. Not at first. And Grace decides to ask her about the real reason she ran off, and finds out about Bill proposing to her, which Grace is like, girl, yes, marry him. Bring some new blood into the Winterbournes. Bring some new blood into this stuffy society. Do it. She wants to keep this girl here. She wants to keep her grandson here. She's like, oh boy, marrying my other son? Yes, do that. So after this, there's another like brief montage of wedding planning before we're dropped at the wedding rehearsal dinner, as told to us by a very convenient large sign that like gets a really lengthy lingering shot for it. Like the camera stays on this sign for a while for all the people that are slow readers. A party is like gorgeous. There's string lights everywhere. It's down at the docks. Like all the rich people have their yachts and shit. Everything seems perfect. Connie and Bill are dancing, and then suddenly, who butts into their dance but Steven DeCunzo? Connie desperately tries to claim she's never met him and tries to keep from having to go dance with him, only to have Steven like follow her through the party and being like, Connie, oh Connie, like calling her real name as he follows her, until she stops and he starts going off about this rant of like thinking his only child died and how so concerned he was, and that, he really thought you were dead, until he ended up seeing a People magazine while stealing a car radio, and guess who was on the cover? Connie with the Winterbournes. And that's how he found out that one, she was still alive, and two, had now come into some money. So Steve's there like, oh, I'm just here to congratulate you on basically conning your way into this life and world and money, and gives her the impression that he's about to wander off for good, only to turn back around and be like, well, I want to be in my son's life. So he coerces her into meeting him the next day at the motel he's staying at by threatening to ruin her son's life and give Grace another heart attack by telling her the truth. And we cut to like Paco and Grace suspiciously eyeing Steve as he leaves the party, and Grace is there like, find out about that man. And she sends Paco to investigate him because they can tell that man is nothing but trouble from a mile off. And Connie, she's scared for herself, her son, her new family. She shows up to the motel the next day, where Steve tells her that he's going to tell the Winterbournes the truth of who she is, and then sue for custody of the baby, because who is going to let a mother who conned this family keep her baby? And he's like, or you give me $50,000 and I'll keep my mouth shut. So Connie sits down, she signs and writes up a check for him for 50 big ones, only for him to take it and then say, well, of course that's not going to be enough. That's only going to last me a while. So he starts telling Connie about this harebrained scheme to pretend to kidnap the baby for an even bigger ransom, like show up at the park, I'll even rough you up a little bit so it looks like you fought back, and then boom, $1 million. They won't even miss it. So he threatens her like 6 ways till Sunday and asks if she's game to put the plan in action the next day, only for Connie to respond that she's getting married that day. And then we cut back to the Winterbourne house where Connie in the dead of night is pulling a gun from a weapon case, and she decides to go back to Steven's place. This is where the movie starts to wrap back around on itself, and we see the TV in the motel playing the same show from the beginning scene, where we know that we'll see Steve lying in the motel bed, already dead, before Connie could do anything to him herself. So she walks in with a gun drawn. They're like, if you don't leave me alone, I'm going to blow your head off, essentially. Starts walking closer, and only to find out that her job's already been done. Like, dude is dead. He's dead and dusted. She ends up tripping on a baby toy that's in the room, accidentally fires a shot, which causes Bill to burst into the room. So he and Connie like have a discussion like, dude, what are you doing here? How did you know? And he's like, I had Paco follow him, so we knew where he was, and then you were here, and then I followed you. Whatever. They all know where Steven is and that he's a not good man. So Bill hurries to take Connie back home because they're like, maybe we shouldn't call the police. It would be bad. I have a gun. And he doesn't like fully believe that she didn't kill him. So he's going to rush her out of the motel room, and she stops and like digs through his coat pockets trying to see like if the check that she gave him is there so that she can take it back and rip it up, but it's missing. And under all the pressure and stress, whenever they stop at this like underpass, Connie decides to come clean to Bill about the mistaken identity situation. And Bill is like, I already knew that. And so Connie's there like, what the fuck? Why didn't you tell me you already knew? Because she's been freaking out. She's been losing her mind over it for so long now. And he didn't tell her, and he knew. And he's like, well, I didn't want to tell you that I knew the truth because I didn't want to scare you away. And so Connie goes on to this rambling explanation of like, she tried to tell the truth several times before, but nobody would let her, nobody would listen. And then, after they get that out of the way, there's a little brief pause before Connie's like, you didn't kill him, right? And Bill says, no, but if he'd known that he was going to hurt her, he might have. And they decide at the end of this that Bill should start calling Connie by her real name. And then they kiss, and it crossfades with the wedding scene from the beginning of the movie. We're nearly at the end. So we see Connie in one of the back rooms of the cathedral, like getting ready for the wedding. She's wearing like just the pinnacle of 90s and 80s wedding fashion with the big poofy sleeves and everything as she looks at the locket with her mother's photo poignantly. She doesn't ask it for a sign or anything this time. She's just looking at it. And this is when the police show up and we're back to the priest running through the cathedral because he's going to get Connie and Bill because holy shit, Grace just said she murdered a guy. So he grabs the two of them and they rush through the cathedral to stop Grace from incriminating herself. And then as soon as they're there, they're like, no, I killed Steve. Me, I killed Steve. Me, Connie, I killed Steve. No, me, Bill, I killed Steve. And then Paco rushes in and he's like, no, I killed Steve. To the police. Or they're like, what do you mean you all killed Steve? And start asking them for the details of the murder. Like, okay, how many times did you shoot him? And they all spout out a different answer at the same time and repeat that with a few other questions, only for none of them to answer any of them right. Or at least not answer all of them right. So the policewoman is like, okay, well, you're all wrong. Also, we just came to ask about the check. And we already have the murderer apprehended. His killer's already in the cop car right over there. So we find out that the new girlfriend that Steve was dating after Connie ended up in the same situation she was. Knocked up and dumped on the street. The difference is this girl decided to take matters into her own hands and off them. So Connie goes and has a chat with her before the police pull off, and Connie's there telling Bill she wants to hire that woman a great lawyer. The type that specializes in those, yeah, I did it, but can you blame me sort of defenses. And completely unrelated to the plot, for these people being super rich, there's a lot of fake flowers like on their boutonnieres and stuff. Y'all couldn't spring for real flowers on your wedding day? So Grace asked to talk to Connie alone, asked who Steven DeCunzo was, and Connie finally confesses the full truth of her identity and situation to Grace. She apologizes to her for the baby not really being her grandson, and Grace looks at her for a bit, steps up, takes the baby from her arms, and says, "He will be." And then implies that she'd like Connie to have 3 or 4 more kids. She's like, my heart could stand 3 or 4 more of these. Finally, Bill and Connie stand at the altar, and we see that costuming did Brendan Fraser dirty with a pre-tied tie that's blatantly apparent in these shots. Like, they are not hiding it whatsoever. I don't know why they had him be in like a tux shirt with that collar, that like upright collar that only has the little bends at the front, when they're going to have him in a pre-tied tie so that it's just fully out in the open. Anyways, and being asked, like going through the vows and being asked if Connie's going to marry Bill, you know, the part where she's supposed to say, I do. Connie's like, no, because the priest was there saying all the vows with the name Patricia. So Connie goes and corrects them and says, I, Constance Doyle, do all that. And Bill takes out the ring, and we see in a very close-up detailed shot of the ring that it's engraved with Bill and Connie inside, the same way that Patricia's had Hugh's name and hers inside, cementing Connie as a proper member of the family as herself. They kiss, the 90s rom-com music comes in, everyone claps, the credits roll, and that's the end of Mrs. Winterbourne. All in all, it wasn't the worst movie. Is it very mediocre? I would say yes. I can't really remember anything about the soundtrack. I can't tell you that like, oh, it was good. I even watched the movie twice for this video and I don't remember anything about the soundtrack. So I guess it was unremarkable, if anything. The writing's predictable because it's a 90s rom-com. It's really tropey. We kind of like start with a narrator and then the narrator just disappears at some point, which is weird. And then Brendan Fraser's Bill a lot. Like Bill and Connie, we're kind of led to believe that there's more time passing in the movie than we're seeing. But because of the fact that like the baby doesn't seem to grow at any point, it makes it all seem like it's happened over a few days or weeks at most. because the baby is always meant to look like an infant. So it looks like all of this happens like really, really quickly, and that like Bill like falls head over heels in love with this woman in the matter of a few days and decides to marry her. And that's kind of weird to me. But it's a rom-com. What are you going to do about it? Overall, I'd say if you like Brendan Fraser and you've never seen Mrs. Winterbourne, it's worth a watch for Brendan Fraser. If you like 90s rom-coms, it doesn't hurt to watch it. If you like just really good movies, I probably wouldn't watch it. Think I'm gonna rate it. I'm gonna a 6 or a 7. 6 or a 7 out of 10. Am I mad that I watched it? No. Would I watch it again outside of the context of making this video? Probably not for several years. So I think that kind of speaks for itself on the movie. I don't think I'll be sitting there being like, man, I haven't watched Mrs. Winterbourne in a long time. I should really rewatch that. It's a nice little one-off. I wasn't mad about it. It's okay. It'll spend a bit of your time with a halfway decent movie. Would I watch it again? Maybe. Would I go out of my way to watch it again? Not really. That's my review. That's my recap. That is Mrs. Winterbourne. And this has been Wednesday Watchies. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.